You still remember the silence after she turned away, not the words, not the moment, but the silence. It wasn't loud, it didn't scream, it didn't even ache, it just stared, a hollow, clean absence, like breath held underwater, or a theatre after the final act. You had told the truth, you had bled the real, and she looked at it calmly, then chose the mask instead. You've worn many since, some heroic, some useful, some just numb enough to pass the time, but sometimes, in the mirror, your eyes flicker not from shame, but from the old fire, the fire that cost you everything, the fire that made you too much, too honest, too raw, too uncontrollable for the myth she needed to survive her own lie. And now you wonder, what if being real is the ugliest mask of all? What if truth isn't welcome? Not because it's false, but because it ruins the game. She didn't reject you for being fake. She rejected you because you stopped pretending, and no one claps for that. Not yet. You believed truth would make you lovable, but only performance gets applause. You walked in with open hands, thinking she wanted your truth. You offered your hunger, your ache, the tremor behind your voice when silence falls. And for a moment, you believed she saw you. But no, she was only measuring how well you could play the part. She was looking for the mask, not the man. The sculpted version of you she could show the world without shame. She didn't want your honesty. She wanted your discipline, how well you could chain the chaos in your chest. She wanted the version of you that performed strength, not the one who dared to bleed. You thought the world would bend for authenticity, but the truth, raw and undressed, is obscene. It embarrasses them. It exposes the script. You were told that vulnerability was courage, that real connection begins where the mask ends. Lie. They crave the illusion more than they crave your soul. The illusion of safety, of predictability, of knowing where you'll place your next step. But your truth, it moved too jagged, too deep, too free. You became the one thing she couldn't tame, and that made you dangerous. She needed you to be almost honest, just enough to seem real, just enough to pass the test, but not enough to unsettle her mythology. She needed you to speak of pain in past tense. She needed your tears sterilized, your anger declawed, your longing softened into poetry, not fire. You didn't understand the rules. You gave her the scream inside the smile. You gave her the man who trembled when he kissed her, not because he was weak, but because something eternal moved through him. She couldn't hold it, not because it was wrong, but because it was real. And the real always threatens the game. You thought love was the home where masks come off, but love, as they've built it, is often a theater, a transaction of images. They love you for how well you perform the role that soothes their wound, not the role that reflects it. You reflected hers. That was your crime. You showed her the part of herself she buried, the part that still feels, still hungers, still dares to fall apart. She called it too much, too emotional, too intense, too unstable. But it wasn't you that was unstable. It was the story she built around herself, and your presence cracked it. She didn't reject you. She rejected what you saw. The moment you stopped dancing, the music stopped. You asked her to meet you in the stillness, and she vanished. Because in that stillness, the illusion dies. The illusion that love is clean, that women are soft, that men are safe, that desire follows a script. No, desire is cruel. It chooses the lie that flatters, the role that repeats the myth. She didn't want you. She wanted the one who didn't remind her of herself. And the mask, did just that. You wear it better now. You know when to laugh, when to vanish, when to stay just out of reach. You've learned that attention flows toward mystery, not confession. That affection rises for the strong, not the sincere. That the moment you hand someone your truth, You've given them a weapon, not a key. And still, part of you rebels. Part of you remembers the fire. Part of you resents the applause that only comes when you lie well enough to be loved. This is the rot at the core of performance. It works, it rewards, it seduces, but it hollows. The longer you wear the mask, the more you lose the face beneath. And they will tell you to keep it, that the mask is manhood, that the mask is power, that the mask is what works. They'll show you men who win with it cold, distant, clean, and maybe they do win, but they die long before the coffin. They forget how to tremble. But you remember the night you told her something real, not dramatic, not strategic, just real, and watched the light drain from her eyes. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she did. Too much. You pulled her out of the script. You forced her to face the part of herself she sedated, and instead of meeting you there, she punished you for it. That punishment wasn't about you. It was about the war between her hunger and her fear, and you became the casualty. So now, what do you do with the man behind the mask? You can bury him deeper. Let him die slowly behind your charm, your control, your curated silence. Or you can let him burn, not to win her back, not to be chosen, but to be free. Because if love demands your silence, it is not love. If affection demands your mask, it is not intimacy. If the only way to be desired is to disappear, then you are not being desired. The role is. But this world does not reward that truth. This world rewards the lie that flatters, the smile that obeys, the strength that conforms. You are not being punished for being weak. You are being punished for being awake. They fear what you remind them of the freedom they abandoned, the grief they dressed up as empowerment, the man they once loved and destroyed. You were not rejected for being fake. You were rejected for taking off the costume. And now here you are, holding both in your hands, the face, the mask. One earns applause, the other earns exile. Choose. She never wanted your soul, she wanted your restraint, tamed and trembling. You thought she wanted you open, but she wanted you sealed, not the flood, the container, not the wild animal, the leash around its throat. Every glance she gave was a scale measuring how tightly you could hold yourself back, how much of your longing you could cage in a single breath. She called it masculine, she called it presence, but what she really meant was, don't spill, don't ache, don't remind me that you feel. She didn't want your truth, she wanted your control over it. She didn't want your soul, she wanted the fire domesticated, decorative, behind glass. And you tried. God, you tried. You clenched your fists around your hunger. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You touched her gently while every nerve inside you burned with madness. You listened to her tales of other men and buried your jealousy like a corpse under your ribs. You became the good man, the safe man, the man who loved without need, who gave without taking, who stood still while she danced between worship and disdain. And still, she left, not because you were too much, but because you weren't enough of a lie. She didn't leave because she saw your shadow. She left because she saw your longing and didn't know what to do with it. Longing is dangerous. It exposes the game. If you want her, truly want her, you force her to feel the weight of her own power. And power makes her panic, because then she's responsible for the hunger, for the pain, for the echoes she stirs, and that is too much. So she calls your desire pressure, your vulnerability emotional labor, your soul unattractive, not because they are, but because they are unmanageable. She prefers the one who can fake it all, who smiles with dead eyes and gives her space, who burns quietly and never asks her to step into the fire, because that man lets her remain untouched. You did not. You were the storm that forced her to feel, and in a world of mirrors, that is unforgivable. So she dressed her escape in politeness. It's not you. I just need space. I'm not ready. You're too intense. But what she meant was, you saw me, and I wasn't ready to be seen. You touched me, and I wasn't ready to be moved. You loved me, and I was only ready to be admired. You had surrendered, not as a beggar, but as a warrior. You gave everything not to be chosen, but because it was real. And reality is raw. It doesn't perform. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't ask if this is the right time. It just arrives, howling and whole. But she wasn't ready for whole. She was ready for pretty, and whole is never pretty. You think maybe you should have held back. Maybe you should have played colder. But no, she never wanted your half-truth either. She wanted the illusion of your surrender, the aesthetic of intimacy, the poetry without the wound. She wanted a man who made her feel powerful without demanding her to be present. And so, she chose the one who smiled through silence, who flirted with absence, who wore mystery like armor and made her guess, the one who never offered his soul, only fragments wrapped in velvet and delay. That man, he won, because he knew the game. He knew that desire lives in distance. He knew that the one who speaks first loses. He knew that mystery isn't about depth, it's about denial. And denial is the sweetest drug. You gave her fire, he gave her smoke. And she chose the smoke because it didn't ask her to change. So now you sit with this fire, still burning, still unclaimed, not by her but by you. Because it was never about her. It was about what you thought you had to offer. You thought that by surrendering, you'd be seen. But surrender, in this world, is misread. They see your open hands and call it desperation. They see your trembling voice and call it weakness. They see your eyes, those cursed, honest eyes, and call it danger. Because when you look without a mask, you awaken something ancient, something they've buried beneath sex and sarcasm and certainty. And now they fear you, because they know you've seen them not the role, not the smile, but them. The little girl hiding behind control, the lover who stopped loving herself, the woman who kills the wild man because she cannot ride the storm he brings. So she leaves, not because she doesn't feel, but because she feels too much, and it terrifies her. So she blames you. Your intensity, your passion, your honesty, all weapons, she says. All manipulation, she claims, because it's easier to demonize the fire than to admit you never wanted to light the match. And now what? Do you dim your flame? Do you become one of them cool, collected, strategic? Do you silence your hunger just to win? Do you let it burn? Let it consume the parts of you that ever thought love meant taming yourself? Because if you have to become less to be loved, it was never love. If you have to hide your ache to be accepted, it was never intimacy. You are not the problem. The problem is a world that fears men who feel. A world that raises women on stories of emotional nights, only to run from the first man who dares to kneel without a sword. A world that teaches you to love with fire, but only rewards those who smolder in silence. You will not win this world with honesty, but you were never meant to win it. You were meant to outlive it. So keep burning. Let them call it too much. Let them say you are dangerous. Let them turn away when your truth becomes unbearable, because it is, and it should be. Only the real can endure it. Only the wild can meet it. Only the sacred burns this deep. And if you must walk alone to keep that fire alive, then walk. Do not beg for those who fear their own reflection. Do not shrink to be held. Do not clip your wings to perch beside the caged. You were made for the storm, not the stage, for the flame, not the applause. And in time, perhaps, someone will come who doesn't fear the fire, who doesn't run from the trembling, who doesn't mistake your surrender for submission, someone who doesn't need the mask to love what lies beneath. But even if no one comes, burn anyway, because there is something holy in refusing to lie. In every rejection lies a mirror not of your weakness, but of your refusal to lie. You always thought being rejected meant something was wrong with you, that you were too sensitive, too honest, too chaotic, too raw. But rejection doesn't reveal your flaw, it reveals your refusal to become what they needed to keep pretending, because what you gave was too sharp, too unedited, too alive. You didn't fail because you lacked something. You failed because you dared to bring everything, and everything in a world addicted to fragments is unbearable. They wanted the echo, not the voice, the symbol, not the man. They wanted the idea of you distant enough to chase, quiet enough to imagine, blank enough to project upon. You were supposed to let them decorate you like a canvas, but you were already a wall of fire. You burned through the illusions too fast. You said things no one's allowed to say. You loved in a language they'd buried. You showed up before the curtains were drawn. You didn't wait for permission. That was your crime. So now they call it too much. But too much only means too difficult to control. And control is everything in this theater. Control over desire, over narrative, over perception. You didn't fit the story. You shattered it. You weren't the character she rehearsed her love on in her mind. You were the rupture, the unfiltered storm, the grief she never wanted to feel again. But still the man you buried remains, beneath the silence, beneath the learned charm, beneath the practiced distance. He waits. He waits not for a woman, not for validation, but for you. For the day you will stop apologizing for being awake. For the moment you will let the dead masks rot and walk again in the wild light of your own godless fire. Because that is what you are, godless fire. Not in the sense of chaos, but in the sense of divinity without approval, sacred without permission, worship that burns rather than flatters. And you thought they would meet you there at the altar of your honesty, but they are still bowing to their gods of comfort, image, symmetry. You are not symmetrical, you are not polite. You do not shrink in the right places. You do not disappear on cue, and so you are punished. Rejection is not the door closing, it is the mask cracking. The moment the myth can no longer contain the force of your reality. You became too heavy for the fantasy to hold, and instead of admitting the story was false, they call you the monster. This is how myths survive, by exiling what disproves them. But the truth is, you were never monstrous. You were simply real in a world that forgot how to look in the mirror. And mirrors frighten those who only know how to pose. When you offer truth, they see themselves. When you stay, even when it burns, they glimpse their own cowardice. When you refuse to play the game, they are forced to face the game itself. Most people would rather kill the truth than kill the lie it exposes. So they run, so they shame, so they label, but the labels are a veil, and underneath that veil is their fear that someone like you still exists, someone who doesn't beg, doesn't perform, doesn't crumble for applause, someone who remembers. Because that's what you are, a memory walking in flesh. A memory of what love was before it became strategy, of what men were before they became caricatures, of what longing was before it was sterilized. You have walked the long road of rejection. You have watched softness be punished, truth be mocked, presence be abandoned. You have seen men perform coldness and be praised. You have seen women reward the very silence that breaks them. You have bled for showing up real, and yet you're still here, which means you are not dead yet. The world tried to kill the real man, but he is not dead. He is buried beneath every text you didn't send, beneath every truth you swallowed, beneath every night you chose dignity over explanation, beneath every time you let her go because staying would have required you to disappear. That man, the one who refused to become the mask, he is still there. He is not broken. He is waiting. He is waiting for the moment you stop grieving their rejection like it was a loss. It was not. It was a rejection of the lie, a refusal to step into the role, a rebellion against the theater you were not meant to perform. You were meant to haunt the play from within to remind them that somewhere, something still breathes outside the script, and that is why they fear you. Not because you're wrong, but because you're ungovernable. You are not soft in the way they want. You are not strong in the way they expect. You are not broken in the way they can fix. You do not ask to be rescued. You do not offer to be safe. You stand ruined, burning, sacred, and say, I am here. Take me as I am, or go, and most will go. Let them. You are not here for the applause. You are not here for the illusion of connection. You are here to remember yourself, to resurrect the man you buried just to be accepted, the one who wept without shame, the one who desired without guilt, the one who walked into love like it was war and temple at once. Rejection was never the punishment. It was the mirror. It showed you what they truly wanted, the role, not the raw. And now, you know, you've seen behind the veil. There is no going back. You will never be loved for your mask again because you've already broken it. All you can do now is rise from its ashes, and you will. Not for her, not for them, for you. Because there is a man beneath the rubble. A man who remembers why he stopped pretending. A man who didn't fall apart, he fell through the lie, through the fantasy, through the prison of being loved only when false. He fell, and now he rises. The world will not celebrate this, but the fire inside you already has. Somewhere, the mask still lies on the floor, untouched, cracked, silent. It no longer fits your face, and yet, the world still offers you a stage. The spotlight waits, the lines are written, the applause is eager, but you do not enter. Instead, you walk away into the dark, into the unknown, into the silence that does not demand a performance. And there, in the distance, someone watches, not the mask, but you, not the performance, but the fire, and they do not clap. They bow, not to worship, to remember.